Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Between the Lines. It's me, Alex. We're going to talk about a big one today. Big one. Adaptability. Oh my God. Adaptability. When I say that has been the bane of my existence since being in a leadership position, management supervisor, y'all, I struggled hard with being adaptable to situations. I'm a guy that likes structure. I'm a guy that likes I want things to just fall into place like a domino effect, that just, you know what I mean? But I learned very quickly that that's a pipe dream, wanting to have everything fall into place, a plan go according, you know, to plan. I guess that's how that's said. Yeah. Boy, oh boy, was I not prepared for that. Who is when they're just starting out their leadership journey, being a manager, supervisor, you try your hardest to try to make things work, right? That's what we're here to do. We have a goal, we have something that we need to accomplish, and it's either you figure it out or somebody else will, right? And me personally, I've felt that if I make a plan and it doesn't work out, I failed at that. But guys, think about this. There's so many things that are completely just out of our control, right? And again, speaking from experience, there are so many things that are out of our control. Like for instance, in my line of work, we always have vendor delays, right? We try as hardest as we can to plan, to, you know, be on the same page, generate a schedule with our vendors, this, that, and the other. But inevitably, guess what? Life happens, shit happens, and you have to learn how to roll with the punches. More often than not, a lot of the people that I see, including myself, when something doesn't go according to plan, in my earlier years, if I had to adapt, if I had to change something because, of something that I couldn't control, my emotions were flowing, right? My emotions were just not in check. And I think that's what made it a little bit difficult for me, to just starting out, being in charge of people because nobody likes that, you know, when you throw, when you throw your hands up in the air, like, oh, woe is me, all is lost, it's like, who wants to follow that guy, you know, jumping into, back when when I was deployed, we were on the USS Eisenhower. And when I talk about everything can change last minute, I sincerely mean anything can change last minute because you never know how, when you're in the middle of the sea and you have guys, you know, deployed, in the Middle East, they're on land, they're carrying out their missions, they're doing what they're supposed to do, right? Or what they're being, led to do. Anything and everything that can go wrong, inevitably will go wrong. So everybody has their jobs, right? For the aviation field, work center to work center, you're on flight deck, you're below deck. Flight deck, you're working directly on the planes, doing that kind of work. When that level of diagnosis fails, it goes down to what we call the I level, intermediary level. And we're the ones that, take that malfunction part, whatever you want to call it, the electronic box. We take it apart, we run tests, and we figure out what the hell is going on with it. Right? So my first couple weeks on the Eisenhower, my first deployment, fresh out to sea, we had done a few workups since then. It's just like month-long trips of being out at sea, you know, carrier qualifications for pilots, just stuff to prep and get ready for actual deployment. And yeah, I had no clue what the hell was going on. You know, I try to ask questions. I try to ask like, hey, um, what do we do in this instance? Who do we talk to for this? What's going on up there, pointing to the flight deck. What are we here to do? What's my job? And in the midst of figuring all that out, um, because of my experience from where I came from before being deployed, which was at a work center that just saw problem after problem after problem. I was told, guess what? You're going to run night shift, and um, I had absolutely no idea how I was going to do that because I was going to have junior sailors under me, and most of the junior sailors that are stationed on a boat never get to see any of these issues come up because when you are stationed on a boat and your boat is in port, you don't have planes on the boat. So you don't get to work on anything, right? You don't get that experience, you don't get that on the job, knowledge and experience. So it was kind of like a full circle of, what the hell are we going to do? So I had to change fast from, figuring it out myself to figuring it out for myself and my junior sailors. And that was one of the things that really struck a chord with me of, I can either let this defeat me or I can get my ass into high gear and making shit happen, to be quite honest. And, it was a struggle bus. I will say that. It was a struggle bus trying to teach junior sailors how to do the work, how to do the procedures, how to do the tests, diagnose things, order this part, take this part from here, use it on this, do the parts change shuffle. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, um, and then trying to figure out where I fit in as that shift's leader amongst um, more experienced, higher ranking peers of mine and senior leadership. It was a challenge, and I could have handled it in one or two ways. I could have been like, I no, I don't want this position. I don't want this responsibility. Give it to somebody else. But again, mama ain't raised no bitch. I don't back down from a fight. I took the time. I had the patience because when you're on deployment, what else are you gonna do? And I jumped in the fire. And I think that that level of adaptability is so crucial to anybody who has a team, anybody who's leading projects, because as we all know, projects as well as you can plan them out, something will go wrong. That's why we have risk mitigation strategies and risk matrices. If this happens, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, or if this happens, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And it's how you tackle those changes, um, as anyone in charge of people, supervisor, manager. It's how we embrace those sudden changes in our plans that really gain us the experience of being able to change at a moment's notice. That's what adaptability is, right? Changing from situation to situation. We're planning on going this route, but hey, guess what? Fuck that. That didn't work. We're gonna veer here, right? And you need to remain calm. You need to settle yourself and understand that you can have the best laid plans in the world, but when approached with a challenging situation, keep a steady face, keep calm, and let your team know, hey guys, we were not prepared for this, but here's what we're going to do. You know, Sailor one, you're going to knock this out. Sailor two, you're going to knock this out. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to try to figure this out. Once I do, I'll bring it all together. We'll talk about it. We'll figure out what we're going to do. And then we're going to go from there, right? Such a simple thing as that will go a long way for you as a leader in terms of like your team and, trying to set the pace, trying to make sure that guys, things are going to come our way, um, to make them feel secured and knowing that you're going to be the one that's going to help them get the job done. And I think that's fair for everybody. If you have that one leader that's constantly just, showing attitude or, getting flustered, wearing their emotions on their face, guilty, 100% guilty of that. It does not always end well because you're going to find one of two things. You're going to find that your team is going to be very hesitant to do anything that you're going to ask them to do, or somebody else is going to step into that role. I've seen it happen plenty of times. It's your choice on how you want to handle it, right? It's your choice in I can either, you know, I can either stay true to what I'm trained to do in the face of adversity, of changes, or I can be flustered. I can back myself into a corner and say, "Yeah, I don't know what to do. Somebody else figure it out." I guarantee you, somebody else will. And your spot in that team's leadership is gone just like that. you know but look at the silver lining. The more that you learn to adapt to changes, the better you are suited for anything else in the future. Use those experiences when you have another employee or um or peer that's kind of showing those signs of like, man, this guy can really move some stones in the future. you know when approached with a challenge, talk to that person. Hey, I just found out, we were planning on going this direction, and we would have been on time for this project, but guess what? Vendors can't deliver on time, and it's going to push our project back a few weeks. Tell me how you would solve it. How would you prep your team, A, for delivering this information, and how would you press them forward into a different direction? And you'd be surprised, guys. You know, some people can really surprise you. And it's giving them the opportunity to practice their critical thinking skills, one, and practice their reaction to sudden changes. Not everybody's going to be perfect, right? We can all agree not everybody's going to be perfect on the first try. I don't care who the hell you are, doesn't happen. But simply showing that, A, as a leader, I'm calm, I'm steady. Yes, this sucks, but you know when you show it, they'll reciprocate it. Again, when you show it, they'll reciprocate it. So if you're asking, hey, how would you handle a situation? And they're like, all right, well, I would do X, Y, and Z. And I would ask, this person, to go take care of this set of things and, go from there. And you can either be like, that's a great fucking plan. You know, you take the lead, roll with it. Or you can be like, I see where you're trying to go here, but let's look at it in a different direction. Okay. Don't ever just say, nope, that's wrong. Here's what we're going to do. That really defeats people. And you have to understand that, right? You have to understand that people they want to learn how to adapt. They want to learn how to face situations head on when things change. So, you know, when when you show confidence in whatever you're trying to do, especially in difficult situations where people are confused, they're nervous because they tried so hard to, you know, plan their hearts out. They tried so hard to, make sure everything was going according to plan. They checked all the boxes, they did all the research, this, that, and the other, and it all blows up in their face. They're gonna look at you, and they're gonna be in their head like, "What the hell do we do?" And you keep a straight face, you keep calm, and you simply level with them. Damn, I know this really sucks, guys, but we don't have the time to sit around and mope about it. We still have a deadline to meet. We still have a goal to crush. You know, I have my thoughts on how we move forward, and I explain X, Y, and Z. You know, does anybody else have any other ideas? Because now's the time, right? And people, I believe, really react positively to those kinds of uh, strategic reactions to things that are just simply out of our control. It's be flexible, and it's not something that you can just wake up one day and just be like, "All right, I'm flexible. Shoot whatever you got at me, and I got it." Doesn't work like that. Again, leadership is all about experience. You know, it is. If you're brand new to this, I'm not going to say it's okay to lose your shit, but it's expected. It's expected. So get all of that out of the way, get it over with, and then start to figure out, okay, here's my just default contingency plan. Here's my default backup plan for X, Y, and Z. Maybe it'll help you, maybe it won't, but guess what? It gives you a good starting point to, all right, this happened. Um, Now we go to plan B. So, the one thing that I really want to nail down with this episode is, you're never going to have a situation where everything's going to fall in line. I take that back. Very seldomly are you ever going to have a situation where everything's going to fall in line and the plan's going to execute itself perfectly, no hiccups, no this, that, and the other. And, that's great. If the effort and if, the stars aligned and everything just, worked out the way it was, then, I'm genuinely happy for those of you that it happened to, because it has maybe only happened to me once. And, and it's not to say that we didn't do our due diligence of planning, you know, risk mitigation, all those other things that you can do to be as prepared as possible. I Something always happens, and it's always those things that are out of our control. It is. It's always those things that you're like, damn, like I just like, what do you do in that situation? I can't make a vendor get the parts faster. I can't go to that vendor and make the parts themselves. And I can't, go here and do this for these people because A, that's not how you build a good relationship. And B, I highly doubt you'd ever get to that point anyway. It's nice to say, but in reality, that's never going to happen. You're never going to do it. I don't care who you are. So, you know, it's, it doesn't mean that you don't have control if you have to be adaptable, if you have to remain flexible. But you do have to control how you react when that situation arises because, more often than not, you're going to just be in that situation. Whether you're a leader or not, supervisor, manager, executive, you know, junior employee, mid-level employee, senior employee, veteran, soldier, marine, sailor, whatever. Every single buddy. Words are hard. Every single person, or my God, every single person is going to go through that moment in their life, and you have your chronic complainers. You have your people that are woe is me. You have those people that are they use the situation to mope about, and they want the attention from people because it some unexpected emergencies cause drama. I don't know, but don't don't let those changes and those sudden hiccups falter you. Don't let them knock you off your block, because if you do, it's very hard to get back on, especially with your other employees, your peers, your leaders. It's it's a very delicate thing how you handle it. Like I've been saying, leadership is a very delicate thing, and yes, it is okay to make mistakes. Everybody's going to make mistakes. Everybody's going to mess up from time to time, but just remember, it is okay for things to change. Talking to myself, it is okay for things to change, especially things that are outside of our control. There's no point getting upset and getting angry, getting flustered, throwing your hands up in the air, just the day is ruined, the plan is off, you know, uh, our pets' heads are falling off, but it's okay. Be flexible, and be flexible with your team, be flexible with your plans, but remain steady. Keep your composure. Remember that, guess what? Probably everybody on your team is feeling the exact same way, and they're waiting on you and how you're going to react, because you're going to set the temperature, you're going to set the tone, and it's either going to get way worse for your team, or guess what? They'll come together and make some shit happen. So I hope this struck a chord with you. If it made you a little bit uncomfortable, I'm glad. That's how we grow. This is Alex. See you guys on the next episode of Between the Lines.